to make a video about Ukraine today, and I got home from work and it was a long day and I didn't really know what exactly to make a video on. I mean, because honestly, if you look at the situation between Russia and Ukraine, what's going on, there's a lot you can write about. There's a lot you can get really in-depth about, and I want to try and do that coming up. But the thing is, I just started this channel and I'm trying really hard to be consistent with it. So I'm trying to make sure I get videos out every single day. And if you're here for the first time, thank you. This is actually my second video. So if you can like it, if you do like it, and maybe hit the subscribe button, that would be awesome. And I would really appreciate it. Yeah, so I come home from work and I'm trying to punch out a script and I really can't think of much. I'm trying to muscle a few out and I don't know. It was a long day and the creative juices aren't flowing. So I thought I'd do something a little bit easy, maybe a little cheating, so I just went onto YouTube. And then I stumbled across a video by one of my favorite content creators, Hasan Piker. Alright, truth be told, I don't really like Hasan or any of his takes, but let's just watch this video anyway, because at least it's some form of entertainment. So, in the video that we're going to be watching, Hasan is going to be watching a video from this guy in a channel called Second Thought. Now, we won't get too much into this guy, because I think dealing with him too much and Hasan at the same time would be too much stupid for one video, so we'll keep him separated for now. We'll probably do a video about him in the future.
Ukraine began receiving warnings from the US about a Russian invasion in November of 2021. Reports emerged of significant Russian military buildups near Ukraine's border, which led the US to significantly increase its intelligence sharing and consultations with allies. Aside from bolstering the defenses of neighboring...
It's correct. America says foreign adversaries are gonna fucking attack every goddamn day. You know, sometimes they're right. This was one of those instances where they were right.
All right, so just right off the bat, he's going to give you an idea of who he is. If you don't know who Hasan is, his political view and stance can basically be boiled down to America bad. Essentially, if America's for it, if America's on their side, it's probably on the bad side, if you ask Hasan. So, but what he does here is, and you'll notice it's very sly and it's very slight, but it's very intentional. When he makes the claim that, oh, you know, America says adversaries are going to attack every other day, so, like, of course they're going to get it right sometimes. I mean, I don't really think that America's pointing out what other countries are doing, saying, hey, they're going to attack here and around this general time. The way that the Biden administration, vote for Joe Biden, the way that the US called them out and said, hey, they're lining up for an invasion soon. That doesn't happen every day. The United States isn't calling that out all over the world. We'd hear about it because there's actually front page news when it was going on. Hasan does this all the time. If there's a way that he can even put a little dig on the US and what the US does when it comes to their foreign policy, he will. All right, let's continue.
I hate this war because I've seen quite a few friends transition from being revolutionary leftists to weird Max Blumenthal, RWA, Russian nationalists. Ukraine is the colonizer, Russia is the colonized. Putin's always doing masterstroke weirdos. Yeah. It is a very odd attitude to have. I don't understand it. It literally doesn't make sense because Russia doesn't even the Russian government doesn't even try to claim that they are even remotely revolutionary, Marxist, socialist, and in any case, so I don't even understand why they would be so duped. And I think it comes from these leftists are most likely all in the USA. Yeah, I think it comes from just the understandable resentment that people have to Western chauvinism. Leaves no room for Western leftists to think about chauvinism in other nations and irredentist or imperialist actions from other nations that are also themselves capitalist. I don't know. I think that's probably the reason.
This is another thing that Hasan is guilty of doing all the time, and it's blaming everything on capitalism. So, again, if you don't know who Hasan is, he's a pretty avowed socialist, and I mean, probably one of the biggest streamers on YouTube. If you're watching this, you probably know who he is. In all actuality, if you're watching this, you probably know who he is, but whatever. Doesn't really matter.
I think a lot of folks on the left think that Putin is bad, but the US and NATO causes conflict. I mean, the US and NATO have definitely significantly contributed to the conflict. That's not ridiculous.
Okay, and here's another thing about Hasan. For some fucking reason, he absolutely has a hate boner against NATO, and I don't understand why. Well, I mean, actually, I do understand why. Again, he doesn't like America. I don't know. I don't know if you could say he doesn't like America. Yeah, but if you think about it, everything he says ends up being anti-America anyway. All right, anyway. He always tries to figure out a way to blame it on the US or blame it on NATO. When he says that the United States and NATO are responsible for this conflict as well as Russia, I just don't understand how he gets from A to B on that. Like, I don't understand I hate when people try to say that the United States and NATO are partly responsible for the Russian invading of Ukraine. And I don't understand the willingness or the desire to compare Russia and NATO. To my knowledge, NATO has never declared war on anybody, or a special military operation for that matter. NATO has not once tried to annex another country's territory, unlike Russia. At the end of the day, it's Ukraine's desire and ambition to join the EU and to join NATO, and it's theirs alone. It's not the United States' call, it's not NATO's call, it's not the EU's call, it's not Russia's call, it's Ukraine's call. So I don't understand how you can say that the United States and NATO are partly responsible because Ukraine wanted to join NATO because they were afraid that Russia would do something more severe. And look where they are now, 2 years into an extended war that's been going on since 2014. I mean, that's why we have Finland and Sweden joining NATO now. They see the threat that exists with sharing a border with Russia. I mean, you got Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine since 2014. How much more evidence do you need? So how the hell do you end up comparing that to NATO? The only time NATO did any kind of quote-unquote offensive operation was in Kosovo, and I really don't think you can compare the two. I mean, yeah, even if NATO was doing an air campaign, it has no comparison to what's going on in Russia. What Russia did in the past in Chechnya. I mean, they leveled Grozny to the ground. There is nothing that NATO has done that has come close to the level of atrocities that Russia commits, even in this war alone, let alone the past 3 or 4 conflicts they've been in since Chechnya. So yeah, I don't understand how Hasan can say Ukraine and NATO are partially responsible for this. It just doesn't make any sense, but that's Hasan for you. I find it interesting how Hasan has such a sterile and like monotone way of describing what Russia's doing is bad. Because yeah, a couple times throughout this video, he will condemn them, but he's almost just saying it like it's part of the story that he has to tell, but he doesn't really have any emotional connection to it, so it really doesn't matter to him. That's what it feels like when I hear him condemn Russia. Oh, but when he has something bad to say about the United States and NATO,
you can get it yourself now.
I understand NATO sucks, but does it need to reform or should something replace it? I mean, I'm a bit of a truther, like Yanis Varoufakis, that the European Union could be reformed inevitably to like not churn out neoliberal capitalism, but instead, I guess, some semblance of socialism. But no, NATO is not a thing that it's like reforming the police. Like, no, you can't. That's not happening. That doesn't mean that like there isn't a necessity. Well, NATO is a little bit different than the police as well, because there's a need for, you know, some semblance of law and order. NATO, on the other hand, no. It has one use and one use only. You can't reform it. Like, guys, just don't Google Western German involvement in NATO if you want to understand what I have to say, or Google, I don't know, Operation Gladio or something. Yeah, reforming NATO is like reforming the Third Reich, which is a good take, actually, because lo and behold, a lot of the Third Reich guys may have made their way into NATO. Just saying.
here we have Hasan at his finest, taking history from World War II that he does not understand and trying to tie it into today's conflict incorrectly. Hypothetically, let's just say that, yeah, there were some Nazis in Western Germany that got through into NATO. Okay, that was in 1947, 48, 49, 1950. Are any of those people alive today? Are any of their ideas still in NATO? Do we see any Nazi-style insignia in NATO? Do we see it in Russia? The amount of mental gymnastics necessary to look at Russia and look at NATO and try and compare one of them to the old Nazis, which is a dumb thing to do today anyway, but to look at the two entities and look at NATO and say, yeah, they're kind of the ones who are kind of Nazi-ish. There's two options in my mind. It's either A, bad faith, or B, stupidity. And I think saying B is being kinder.
It's not like, that doesn't mean that Russia's calculations here or Russia's actions here are in any way, shape, or form justifiable, especially considering that most of these European countries had already openly said that they were not interested in allowing Ukraine into NATO ever.
By the way, and the reason they said they couldn't join NATO is because they had territorial disputes, not that they would just never join because they don't like Ukraine. And why did they have the territorial disputes? Whose fault was that?
Anyway.
Of personnel. Efforts to staff new units have been hampered by the need for extensive Western military assistance to train new recruits. Meanwhile, there's strong pressure from Russian advances, which necessitate continuous replenishment of manpower and materiel, something Ukraine just cannot balance at the moment. To address this, Ukraine passed a new draft law on April 11, 2024 that aims to address the urgent need for more soldiers. The new law mandates that all eligible men aged 18 to 60 register for military service. It removes defined service terms, that is, limiting service to a defined time period, and it increases compensation for volunteers. The law also includes provisions allowing individuals with certain criminal convictions to serve, and mandates local government and police support in the conscription process. These changes have sparked significant public opposition due to concerns over indefinite duration of service, human rights, and the psychological impact on conscripts and their families.
Also, real quick, I like how in the video that Hasan is watching by this Second Thought retard. Also, real quick, I like how in the video that Hasan's watching about this Second Thought guy, he's talking about how, like, oh, people are starting to get worried that Ukraine is increasing their draft and taking more people in. While at the same time, he's showing video of the old Wagner dude, Evgeny Prigozhin. I think that's a good juxtaposition. This Soviet USSR communist simp trying to do everything he can to suck up to Russia and still failing spectacularly, just like the USSR.
First, French troops deployed in Ukraine without NATO's collective decision would not automatically trigger Article 5. France would need to convince other NATO members that the attack constituted an attack on NATO itself. Second, since Article 5 requires a consensus among NATO members, each member would need to agree.
I cannot comprehend a world in which this is seen as like politically appropriate by the overarching French population that they go to Ukraine and fight against Russian forces in Ukraine and die in Ukraine.
So Hasan's one of those guys too, huh? One of those people that think that France just would never fight and they're cowards all because of World War II. Those same people who've never learned anything about World War I, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, I think that France might I think France might know better than any other country in Europe what it's like to let a European strongman slowly take control over other countries and kind of seeing what other people would allow them to get away with. I think France might have some experience with that, and they actually might be one of the few countries in Europe willing to go there and prevent that from happening. So I like how of all the countries, Hasan picks France. Okay, so just kind of shows that what his lack of knowledge is when it comes to history, especially maybe even World War II and World War I. Okay, hey, real quick, if you made it to the end here, first of all, I want to thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't know why you're watching somebody who just put out 2 videos, but thank you anyway. So real quick, I want you to subscribe and like the video and share it with all of your friends. That would be so super awesome.